The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the clock. The judge lifted the paper, looked up, and spoke in a calm, heavy voice. Guilty. The word hung in the air like a bell. The young man with long hair and a beanie, known on the internet as Kai the Hatchet-Wielding Hitchhiker, did not look away. He stared forward, jaw tight, like he was bracing for a wave to hit. Cameras clicked. People held their breath. The viral hero had just been called a convicted murderer. How did this happen? How did a man who once saved a stranger on the street end up here? Earlier. A cold, bright morning in California. A big man drives his car into a worker on the side of the road. People scream, tires squeal, the car keeps going and smashes into a truck. A young hitchhiker in the passenger seat, his name is Caleb Kai McGillvary, feels the world tilt. The driver gets out, wild-eyed, not thinking clearly. He grabs a woman, tight, like he wants to hurt her. People shout for help. Kai jumps out of the car. He is small compared to the driver, but he does not freeze. He pulls a hatchet from his backpack. It is not huge. It is not shiny. It is just a tool. He swings the flat side to stop the attack, then again, fast, loud, like he is hammering the moment shut. The crowd pulls back. The woman breaks free. Sirens grow louder. Kai's chest rises and falls. He drops his arms and steps away. Later, a local TV reporter finds him on the sidewalk. Kai talks like a surfer, loose and bright. He tells the story in a rush, ending with 3 words that will echo across the internet. Smash, smash, suh-mash. He laughs a little, like he cannot believe it either. The clip goes up online. Overnight, he turns into a meme. Millions watch. Comments pour in. Hero. Legend. This guy saved a life. The country falls for the wandering hitchhiker who did the right thing. For a few days, everything is easy and loud. Kai plays guitar on small stages. He gives more interviews. People take selfies with him. He talks about kindness. He talks about going where the wind goes. He says he has no phone, no fixed address, and likes it that way. The world loves a simple story. A good guy with a hatchet who stepped in when it mattered. But real life is not simple. The waves that lift you can pull you under too. The attention feels warm at first, then hot, then strange. People want pieces of him. One more interview, one more photo, one more wild story. He keeps moving, couch to couch, bus to bus. He smiles, he jokes, he hums little tunes under his breath. But when the cameras turn off, he is just a young man drifting fast, without a plan, without a steady friend to say, slow down. Weeks pass. The bright clip is still everywhere, but the road is quieter. Kai heads east. He ends up in New Jersey, a long way from the California curb where the internet first met him. He crosses paths with a man named Joseph Galfy, an older attorney who lives alone in a quiet town. Their meeting will become the center of the storm, the turning point that will be argued and replayed in court, on TV, and in his own mind. The house is neat, the street is calm, the door closes, no cameras, nothing but 2 people, and an evening that will change everything. The next day, the police find Joseph Galfy dead in his home. Neighbors stand on the sidewalk, whispering to each other. Yellow tape flutters. A reporter asks a question. No one wants to answer. What happened inside that house? Officers collect evidence. They call other departments. They start looking for a person with long hair and a backpack who was last seen with the victim. They look for Kai. Back on the road, Kai posts online and talks to people he meets. He says he was hurt. He says he fought back. He says things that point in different directions. The story does not fit into a quick clip anymore. It is messy and human and painful. The police, the prosecutors, and later the jury will say one thing. Kai will say another. But right now, here in Chapter 1, we are in the middle of the confusion, where facts and fear and memory push against each other like storm clouds. The search grows. Photos go out. TV stations use the old hero interview next to a new headline with the word wanted. Strangers who once asked for selfies now send in tips. I think I saw him at the train station. He might be at the bus terminal. Police follow leads across state lines. The same internet that made him famous helps track his steps. At first, he still meets people who call him a hero. They hand him food. They offer a ride. They repeat his old catchphrase and smile. He nods and keeps moving. He is restless. He is tired. He writes short posts that sound like someone trying to shout and whisper at the same time. He says he acted in self-defense. He says he's afraid. He says he needs to keep going. Outside a big bus station, a patrol car rolls up to the curb. Inside, The air smells like coffee and rain. People drag rolling bags across the floor. A loudspeaker calls out cities in a flat voice. All passengers for Philadelphia, gate 12. All passengers for New York, gate 18. Kai walks with his head down and his pack tight to his shoulder, blending in like any other traveler who doesn't want to miss a ride. Two officers step through the automatic doors. Their faces are calm but focused. They split, slow and careful, scanning the crowd. One turns toward the food court. The other walks along the ticket line, eyes moving, hands quiet. Somewhere, a phone buzzes with a new message. He is here. The officers see the long hair, the beanie, the backpack. They do not run. They do not shout. They move with purpose. One comes from the front, the other angles from the side. People at the snack bar don't notice yet. A little kid bites a pretzel and points at a bus beyond the glass. A woman sighs and checks her watch. Outside, rain starts to fall, dotting the windows like Morse code. Inside, a hand reaches gently for an arm. "Sir," the officer says, "can we talk to you for a moment?" The young man stops. He takes a breath. He turns. The officer's voice stays even. "Are you Caleb McGillvary?" A beat of silence. The crowd sound wraps around them like a blanket. Soft, noisy, normal. Then it tears. "Yes," he says. Hands move. Words come fast, clean, practiced. "You're under arrest." The cuffs click. In the glass, the rain turns from dots to lines. This is the second extreme turn, the moment the hero on the sidewalk becomes the suspect in a death. This is the line between the bright, viral clip and the long, serious walk toward a courtroom where everything will be weighed again and again with no music and no jokes. Cameras will find him once more. Headlines will stack up. A jury will sit for days, eyes forward, pencils ready. He will say he acted to protect himself. Prosecutors will show photos, play recordings, and say the evidence proves something else. People will argue online. Old fans will feel confused. New viewers will only know him as a name in a dark story. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, a judge will speak a single word that changes a life. But that is not yet. Right now, the doors of the bus station open with a hiss, and the officers guide him out into the wet afternoon. The clock over the ticket counter clicks to the next minute. The crowd closes behind them, and the ride that started with "smash, smash, suh-mash" is rolling toward a verdict no one saw coming. Rain was still falling when the doors of the station slid open. The officers guided him across the wet sidewalk. Lights from the patrol car blinked on the shiny ground like red and blue fish. People inside the station pressed closer to the glass to watch. The cuffs were tight and cold. The young man with the long hair kept his eyes forward and his steps even, as if each foot knew where to go without asking. They placed him in the back seat. The door shut with a heavy thump. The rain drummed on the roof, a steady, empty sound. The car pulled away from the curb and slid into traffic. The city looked washed out, like someone had turned the color down. At the station, they took his backpack, his beanie, his shoelaces. They wrote his name on a tag and clipped it to a clear bag of belongings. He stood in front of a gray wall while a camera clicked, left, right, straight ahead. They rolled his fingers on a glass panel. Black lines bloomed on a screen, the map of his hands. He signed a form. He asked for water. He got a paper cup. "Sit tight," an officer said, pointing to a metal bench. He sat. Time stretched like gum. Down the hall, a phone rang. Somewhere a copier whirred. A TV on the wall played low headlines about weather, sports, and then, after a beat, about him. The loudest thing in the room was the quiet inside his head. A door opened. A detective stepped in. He was middle-aged with careful eyes and a tired tie. He held a folder under his arm like it was a sleeping cat. "Caleb," he said softly, "I'm Detective Harris. Come with me, please." The voice was not mean. It was not friendly. It was balanced, like a plank over water. They led him into a small room that smelled like coffee and dry markers. A camera blinked red in the corner. A table sat in the middle with 3 chairs and a box of tissues that looked untouched. The detective placed the folder on the table and sat across from him. Another detective, a woman with a neat bun and a clean notebook, sat to the side. She clicked her pen once and waited. "I'm going to read you your rights," Harris said. He did, slowly, carefully. The young man nodded, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. He knew cameras. He knew microphones. He understood that words could travel faster than a bus. "Do you understand?" Harris asked. Do you want to talk?" A pause, like a stone skipping water. "I want to tell you what happened," he said. He started at the house. He used simple words, like someone telling a story, to make sense of it himself. He said he met a man named Joseph. He said he was given food and a place to sleep. He said he woke up feeling hurt and scared. He said he fought back. His voice was steady but soft. He looked down when he talked about fear and up when he talked about fighting. The detectives listened. Sometimes they asked him to repeat a word. Sometimes they asked for the time on a clock he could not see anymore. In another part of the building, other officers were busy with phones and screens. They pulled camera footage from a train stop. They looked at credit card records. They matched timestamps. They made a line on a whiteboard that ran like a road across 2 days. They drew boxes for arrive, store, house, bus. They circled gaps and wrote question marks. Facts grew like pushpins on a map, pulling threads between them. At the same time, forensics teams were at a small house on a quiet street. They moved carefully, wearing gloves and booties. They took photos. They collected small things that could tell big stories: a fiber in a corner, a smear on tile, a dish out of place, a phone with a lock code. They spoke to neighbors who stared at their own lawns as if the grass knew something they did not. The young man in the interview room talked until his words began to loop. He ran a hand through his hair, then made a little tent with his fingers and set his forehead there. The female detective slid a tissue box closer, not as a hint, just as a habit. He didn't take one. The camera blinked its red light, steady as a heartbeat. "Okay," Harris said finally. He closed the folder and stood. "Thank you for talking with us." He opened the door. "We'll be back in a minute." Good. The door closed with a quiet click. The room felt like an unplugged TV. Same shape, less noise. They took him to a holding cell that looked like a big shower stall with a bench. The door was bars in space. The space felt bigger than the bars. He sat. A clock high on the wall said almost nothing, 1 minute at a time. When night came, the city outside slowed. The station did not. Paperwork multiplied. Phones kept ringing. The case had jumped from a local page to a national one because the internet had already met this face. Reporters called and asked for statements. Someone said, "Iaquim." No comment. Someone else said, "We will hold a press conference tomorrow." A captain rubbed his eyes and circled parts of a press release with a blunt pencil. Morning brought coffee, a bagel on a paper napkin, and the first court appearance. He stood before a judge, in a small room with a flag behind the bench and a clock that ticked too loudly. The judge spoke in careful words: charges, rights, counsel, bail. The young man's new lawyer, a public defender named Mr. Lopez, stood beside him like a shield shaped from paper and courage. "We will enter a not guilty plea," Mr. Lopez said firmly. His voice filled the small room like a warm coat. "We ask for reasonable consideration regarding bail." The prosecutor shook her head once, a small motion with big meaning. The judge looked down at the file and then up at the man with the long hair. "Bail is denied," the judge said. The gavel did not bang. It did not need to. Back at the jail, days found a rhythm, the way water finds a path. Wake up, count, food tray. Hour in a yard with concrete and sky. A letter that smelled faintly of a stranger's house. A TV in a corner playing old movies with the sound too low. The young man lay on his bunk and stared at a ceiling he did not choose. He thought of highway lines rolling past bus windows. He thought of waves against rocks. He thought of a word that had once felt simple, hero, and how it now sat at the bottom of his stomach like a stone. Mr. Lopez visited and spoke quietly through the metal screen. "Listen to me," he said. "We will build a defense. You will tell your story. But your story needs a spine, not just sparks. We need timelines. We need proof. We need to understand what the state will say and what we can answer." He slid a yellow pad through the slot. "Write. Everything. Times, places, names. Your feelings matter, but the clock matters more." He wrote. He wrote like a person bailing water. He wrote the smell of the room, the way the couch felt, the time on the stove clock, the sound of shoes on a wooden floor. He wrote the spot on his arm where soreness sat like a bruise. He wrote about fear, a small animal that hides and leaps. The prosecutor built, too. She built the state's story like a careful tower. She laid down facts first: photos, texts, receipts, bus tickets. She added expert opinions, a medical examiner's report, a timeline analysis, digital footprints that walked across phones and servers. She framed it with words that juries recognize: intent, force, credibility, reasonable doubt. She did not rush. Towers that last are not built fast. On TV, old clips from California ran again. The reporter's voice played the three famous words. People online fought in comments like waves hitting each other. He's a hero. He's dangerous. You don't know what happened. The evidence will show. The noise grew loud enough to fill rooms all by itself. Weeks turned into months. A judge in a higher court set a trial date. The calendar page felt like a ticket you cannot return. The jail gave him a clean shirt that did not fit quite right. Mr. Lopez brought a slim suit coat and a tie that refused to sit straight. "You'll do fine," the lawyer said, smoothing the tie that still did not listen. "Speak clearly. Tell the truth as you know it. Let me worry about the law words." Jury selection came first. A line of people sat in a box and answered questions that tried to find out if their hearts had already chosen. Have you seen any media about the defendant? Can you put that aside? Do you understand the burden of proof? Some nodded like students, some frowned like someone reading a difficult recipe. A few were excused with thanks and relief. Others stayed, wearing the expression of people about to carry a heavy, invisible thing. The courtroom was bigger than the first hearing, but felt smaller because there were more eyes inside it. The prosecutor stacked her files in neat piles with colored tabs. Mr. Lopez set his notebook open to a page that said in big letters, "Simple, True, Timeline." The young man sat at the table and faced forward. He could feel the jury box like a weather front behind him, cool, alert, undecided. "Ready for opening statements?" the judge asked. Both sides said yes. The prosecutor rose. She spoke calmly, her voice a clean line. She promised the jury a story told by evidence. A meeting, a night, injuries that could not be explained away, actions that were not an accident. She clicked a small remote, and a timeline appeared on a screen. Boxes, arrows, times. The room leaned forward a little. People like pictures. Mr. Lopez stood next. He did not click a remote. He walked closer to the jury box than the projector screen and spoke like someone telling neighbors what happened on their own street. "This case is about fear," he said, "and about a young man who had to make a choice in a moment when he believed he was in danger." He promised to show messages, to ask hard questions about timing and injuries, and to remind the jury that the law does not ask for certainty, only for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. He asked them to keep their minds open. He sat down. His hands were steady, but he breathed out like someone who had just lifted a couch. Witnesses came. A neighbor with careful hair and a soft voice described seeing the young man arrive at the house. A store clerk remembered a purchase: water, a sandwich, a travel-sized bottle of something plain. The medical examiner spoke in words that were not graphic but were firm, describing what he found and what he concluded. The defense stood up after each witness and asked questions that were not fast but were pointed, like tapping the edges of a picture frame to see if it rattled. Sometimes the courtroom felt tense enough to hum. Sometimes it felt like everyone was holding their breath at the same time and would never breathe out again. Then there would be a recess, and people would stand, stretch, whisper, and look at their phones as if news might be hiding there like a small animal behind a leaf. In the jail van on the way back and forth each day, the young man watched the city slide by, dogs pulling owners down sidewalks, kids with backpacks, a woman laughing into a phone she held like a cookie. He pressed his forehead to the glass for a second before pulling back. The glass was colder than he expected. Midway through the trial, the prosecutor introduced a piece of digital evidence that drew the room's attention like a magnet. Messages, time-stamped and saved, showing movements and contact before and after the night in question. She did not raise her voice. She did not point. She simply laid the times next to the claims and let the gaps do some of the talking. Mr. Lopez stood and asked careful questions about context, about what a message can't show, the feeling in a room, the sound of a voice, the fear in a chest. Then came the decision point that every trial has, even if it looks different each time. Should the young man take the stand? They sat in a small meeting room with bad art on the wall and a humming vent in the ceiling. Mr. Lopez spoke straight. "You have the right not to testify. The burden is on them. If you do testify, I will ask you questions, and then the prosecutor will cross-examine you. She is very good. She will push. If you tell your story, it must be the same every time, without cracks. You must be ready for the push." He stared at the table. He traced a line, wood with his finger like it was a road, on a map. He thought of the first time. A camera turned toward him on a sunny California sidewalk. He thought of 3 words that made the world laugh and cheer. He thought of a quiet house, a locked door, fear sitting in his ribs like a knotted rope. He thought of a man who did not live to speak his side. "I want to talk," he said. The next morning, the courtroom felt like a drum. He took the oath, he sat, he folded his hands together to keep them from floating away. Mr. Lopez began with soft questions. Who are you? Where were you born? Where were you staying? Then he moved to that night. The young man's voice did not carry far, but the room bent toward it anyway. He said he felt unsafe. He said he fought back. He said he left in a rush. With his heart racing hard enough to shake his bones, he did not add extra words. He did not try to be clever. He looked at the jury sometimes, not like a show, but like someone checking to see if people heard him. When the prosecutor stood for cross-examination, she did not change her tone. She carried a binder and a quiet certainty. She asked for times and got them. She held up the timeline and pointed to gaps. She asked why he did not call 911. She asked why he did not go straight to a hospital if he felt hurt. She read parts of his earlier statements and asked why this one was different in a small but important way. Her questions were steps across a river. She did not splash. He answered. Sometimes he said, "I don't know." Sometimes he said, "I was scared." Once he started to say more, and Mr. Lopez touched his sleeve very lightly, a reminder, so he stopped and took a breath before continuing. The judge watched with eyes that gave away nothing. The jury wrote notes in small, private handwriting. By the time both sides rested, the room felt use. D up. The judge told the jury they would hear closing arguments the next day and then receive instructions on the law. The jurors filed out like people leaving a church, quiet, thoughtful, holding something they could not set down. The young man stood as the deputy touched his elbow and led him toward the side door that always felt like a wave pulling back out to sea. Night came again. The jail felt the same as the night before, and also not the same at all. He lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling and tried to sleep. He counted his breaths. He counted bus stops from a life that already felt like a postcard. He imagined the jury room, a long table, pens rolling, a coffee pot that tasted like chalk, a clock dragging its feet. Morning came, and with it the last words from both sides. The prosecutor spoke about evidence and choices and what the law required when certain facts were proved. Mr. Lopez spoke about fear and doubt and the distance between what we think we know and what we can truly be sure of. The judge read instructions that sounded like a recipe no one wanted to cook. If you find beyond a reasonable doubt, if you do not find beyond a reasonable doubt, then the bailiff stood. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you may retire to deliberate. The door to the jury room closed. The courtroom exhaled. Reporters slid out to find coffee and plug-in chargers. The young man sat. Mr. Lopez wrote something on his pad and then scratched it out and then drew a small square he filled in like a dark window. Hours ticked on the clock like slow raindrops. Once the jury buzzed with a question, and everyone stood and filed back in. The judge read a short answer and sent them out again. The door shut. The room returned to waiting. Late in the afternoon, when the light through the high windows leaned gold, a small sound cut the air. 3 taps. The bailiff stood, spoke, to the judge, and nodded. People hurried back to their seats. The clerk placed a thin stack of paper on the bench. The door at the side of the room opened. The jury filed in, eyes down, faces arranged very carefully. "Members of the jury," the judge said, "I understand you have reached a verdict." "Yes, Your Honor," the foreperson said, voice steady but low. "Please hand the verdict forms to the clerk." The clerk took the papers and passed them to the judge. The judge glanced down, then folded them and handed them back. The clerk stood. In the matter of the state versus Caleb McGillvary. Every sound in the room stopped. Even the lights seemed to hum more quietly. The clerk looked up, and the next word, one word, heavy as a stone and quick as a spark, was about to fall.